Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I am truly excited to have my guest today. Her name is Rosie Tomkins, and her book is called Let Nature Be Your Compass. And here it is. And it, I find this to be such a refreshing um, book, and I think very apt for our time. And so, just the second part of the title is Introducing the Power of Natural Intelligence. And Rosie, welcome.
My pleasure. How lovely to be here.
It's wonderful. Looking at your book, I just thought it was so refreshing because you are looking at business in with fresh eyes. And
Yeah,
so rather than the perhaps cliched or maybe even outdated metaphor of looking at business through sport and competition, that
sure.
model of competition, you're looking at it in a much more potentially collaborative um, or more gentle way, um,
Mhm.
a metaphor of nature. I
Yeah.
found that, as I've said, incredibly refreshing, but inspiring too. So, what led you to step outside the norm in the way that business is considered to look at it from this perspective?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a much more inclusive way of bringing people together. And I've always believed all my life that everybody's a leader. And we talk about leadership all the time, but actually everyone has a very different view on what leadership means. So the reason I went into this work is really because I sold my company to a PLC, and I'd run my own company and then was in the corporate environment. And I found it very unusual. I think they found out myself. I think they found me quite unusual as well. But it was very competitive, and I didn't understand that because we were all trying to grow a business and collaborate together to be the best that we could be. And I know that in communication terms, we talk about 90% of communication being non-verbal, and yet we seem to concentrate all the time on this 10% verbal communication. So a lot of the training in corporates is still done on PowerPoint. It's very easy to go on courses and retain very little of the information. So you come away and you think, wow, I really enjoyed that, but actually what have you learned? And a couple of days later, you can't even remember, about 10% of it that you can remember. So my view was that if I ever went into training, which I didn't think I was going to, or I would turn all this on its head, and see if I could produce something that came from the 90% non-verbal and had an impact in a different way. And through my experiences, which I've shared in the book, I was lucky enough to a wonderful lady called Alison, who said, would I like to work in business with horses? And I thought she was barking mad at the time. But she put me in an arena with a most beautiful, magnificent Frisian horse who was actually a stallion. And I learned without no riding involved, just at liberty with this beautiful animal. And within like 10 minutes, I'd learned more about my style of leadership in business than anyone else could ever have told me. It was just incredible. The power of these animals and the kind of presence that they have is incredible. And it's like a mirror to what's going on in your life at that time. And it was such an incredible revelation to me. Um, and I never thought that, 10 years later, I'd be working in the corporate world with horses and literally taking nature into the boardroom, which is really what I do.
It's the horses are just the thing that really made me kind of go, oh. So can you tell us in a bit more detail what that experience was that really made you talk us through that process of being with a horse and then thinking, oh, do you know what? I've got something to learn here.
Yeah. So the only thing, I mean, I don't like to anthropomorphize animals. I'm very keen not to do that. We really don't know what they're thinking. We don't really know what they're feeling. We're just guessing all the time. And but what does happen, which is extraordinary, is that they need to know three things from us. And it's the three things that we need to know when we meet another human being is, can I trust you? Am I safe? And who's leading right now? And that's really what a horse needs to know. And if it doesn't feel comfortable with you, it won't go with you. It will, disappear out of the paddock or wherever it is. It will move away. So that building of rapport with individuals is really, really important. And it's the same with human beings. If you don't trust somebody or you don't feel safe, you definitely don't want to be working with them or in a relationship with that person. So to just try to explain, it's like a mirror. Whatever you bring to the paddock, they kind of relay back to you. So if you're nervous in any way, you see the horse becoming very nervous. If you go too quickly and you break through the boundaries, just like human nature, if we suddenly went up to each other and patted each other on the head, it would be really kind of, what's the word? It would be too much, too soon. And it's the same with the horse. If you move in quickly like that, the horse will move away from you at speed because it's working in a different way. It's picking up your energy and it's reflecting it straight back at you. So the insights are incredible. So all I see myself is like a bridge between the two worlds of interpreting actually what's happening in a kind of sensible business way, I suppose, or in a sensible, I do one-on-one coaching with people as well, to help them in their development, to see, and it gives you the most incredible chance to see how others see you. We very rarely get that chance.
So, what I'm hearing from you as you're describing this is that the primary focus for you in terms of business is relationship, whereas the corporate world, it's about results.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that understanding that you need both. And that, as I say, that heart is really the heart and the head, isn't it, as well? We're so used to that performance driven results. And what we're doing is wearing people out. They're exhausted. The most people come to me because they're in overwhelm. They are absolutely, we thought that the digital age would bring us peace and less work. And in fact, it's speeded everything up to a ridiculous level where we don't find any peace. And I think that's also what the horses bring. They bring this incredible state of being in the present. And they're not interested in what car you drive or how, your business title or how much money you've got in the bank, or even if you're a celebrity, that is, they don't care. They just want to know, can I trust you? Am I safe? And who's leading right now in the present? And I think as humans, we've forgotten how to be in the present and just be.
This is a recurring theme on this channel, but there is something else that strikes me as being very important when we're comparing the two approaches, one relationship, the other one's about goals. Because on one of my other channels, Pet Talk with Anna and Teddy, I interview an amazing, I would say a new stable, if you give me a new stable of behaviorists who are looking at not dog training, but dog teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Their focus is not on results-based training.
Mm-hmm.
Their focus is on building the relationship with the animal. And of course, this holds for right across the the different animal species, that it's a building the relationship, because once you have the relationship, you work together and you get that result that you wanted. It's
Mm-hmm.
just you're not getting the proverbial whip out
Yes.
and to get what you want. It's much more, as you said, heart centered. And here you're applying the same principle. But
Mm-hmm.
it all sounds wonderful, but I can hear people out there going, yeah, but what about natural selection? That's nature too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh
talk us
yeah,
Rosie.
absolutely. So again, I talk a lot about prey and predator, and that a lot of people don't realize that there are two other areas. So what I try to introduce is that leadership in the wild can be ruthless, brutal, bloody. It's not always nice and fluffy, absolutely not. And certainly, a farm in at night is a quite almost like a killing field. The owls are killing the mice, and the rats are after the whatever. So it's not always kind of something out of Tales from the Riverbank or something like that. However, they don't wipe out the whole species. They don't go into massacring the whole of that race or that kind of people or that kind of breed. They're selective. And what I love is the watering holes in Africa, where you see the zebras. They're down there in their thousands with the lions walking by, and they're reading the energy. So a lion will walk next to a zebra when it's not hungry, and the zebra knows that the lion is not hungry, so it's not in energetically, it knows that it's not in any danger. So there's this kind of collaboration at water holes which is mind-blowing. And that's the difference really between, I think, ourselves and mankind. In a way, we tend to be so dominant and so sure of what we're doing. We're not in balance, whereas nature is far better in balance. I mean, there are, somebody always says to me when I'm working, a fox in a hen house. A fox does kill every hen in the house. But again, if they weren't contained by man and those hens were able to get away, it wouldn't have that chance to do that. And as I say, in the wild, it balances when they're free. And I always say, I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, but if we took human beings off the planet, I'm sure animals would do a lot better.
Maybe. I think I'm very careful of anti-human sentiment, which is so
Yeah.
currently and incredibly dangerous at this moment in time. But I understand sentiment, and I think if we think about that fox in the hen house, this is not. I think we need to contrast again the intention, because intention is everything. And the thing about the animal kingdom is that animals kill to eat, kill for pleasure. They don't hunt, and they don't generally abuse
No,
their.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So that's very clear. And so what happens with the fox in the hen house is that what you is the it's the kid in the candy shop that doesn't know where to stop. So there's still an innocence there. They just aren't able to regulate themselves and think through. And there is some evidence that actually they're storing some of that.
Yeah, yeah, they are. Yeah.
So it's whoa, here's the opportunity for a feeding frenzy, and surplus. If we have access to the surplus, then we're going to do something with it, which is extremely different from the nihilistic tendencies of, let's call it, the corporate culture.
Yeah.
And we can see that all around us in the way that small businesses are just being clobbered and annihilated by the big guys who come and influence governments to put regulation in that is in to the small businesses, but isn't going to hurt them. This is competition with an intention. And I think that's a distinction, isn't it?
Yes. And I talk a lot about rotational leadership in the work I do. And again, humans get tied up in ego, and animals, as far as I know, don't. And so working with a herd of horses, you know, what the real special thing is when they're running at liberty, which my horses do, is that you can clearly see the roles being defined. So in a herd of horses at freedom, at liberty, on the prairie, you would always have a lead mare who's the alpha female, and you have an alpha male. And the fascinating thing about that is, you know, when I ask them, you know, who's leading, or, you know, who's leading the group, they always think it's going to be the male, and it's going to be the strongest male in the group. And the reality with horses, it's exact opposite. It's always the female that leads. She leads the group, and she's often older. She's the matriarch. She's had experience. She can't run as fast as some of them. She's possibly the oldest mare there, but she has the knowledge and the wisdom to steer the herd under pressure. And interestingly, the strongest male, the alpha male, his role is at the back, and he's there to protect the herd. So, you know, this is a rotational thing. They don't stay like that forever. You know, it depends on the circumstances. Within that herd, there are horses that do different things at different time, like the brood mares that look after the young. There's horses that find water, horses that find mineral. But they're not all, you know, as I say, in the corporate world, you tend to be kind of stuck with your business card and this ego attached to the position you're in. And yet in the wild, that is really, they're working for the good of the whole rather than the good of themselves. And again, that's a massive piece for me.
It's reminded me of elephants,
Yeah.
where it's a very similar situation. So what is natural intelligence then?
Okay, so the reason I call it natural NQ is because when I'm working in the corporate world, as soon as you mention anything to do with animals, they tend to think you're a bit tree huggy. So you have to be very kind of defined in what you say. So most people have heard of IQ. You know, you need that obviously to get into positions in business and have experience and, you know, pass the exams. A lot of people have heard of EQ, emotional intelligence. Some people have heard of SQ, spiritual intelligence, but very few people have heard of natural intelligence. And for me, it's about the positive use of your instincts and your insights and your perceptions, which allow you to, with confidence, make a decision at speed. So again, you know, I would use an example. Some of your listeners may have heard of the Hudson River landing, where Captain Sullenberger, he was being told, he was a very experienced pilot, to turn the plane round and go back to LaGuardia. And in that moment, in that kind of split second, he made a decision based on his natural intelligence, which is all of them combined, to land the plane on the Hudson River. And he saved, obviously, all those lives, over 200 lives. Another example would be a friend of mine who's a medical doctor, was struggling with a patient with mental health problems. And they were really struggling to kind of calm this patient down. And suddenly the door opens and in comes a nurse, and she just sings a song. And that to me is the definition of natural intelligence, knowing what to do in the moment and trusting that you have the answers within you without having to go outside. And I personally think that's what we're losing. We're losing that natural intelligence, which we all have, but we suppress it because we think we've got to get validation from someone else. We've got to find, you know, someone else who's an expert to tell us what color to paint our walls, or, you know, what kind of, you know, what we should do with our children. Instead of relying on our own natural intelligence, which will give us the answers if we trust it.
That's so important, really, because again, this is a time in which we are continually being discouraged from trusting ourselves. It is, as you said, all about the expert, to the point where people don't particularly want to sing anymore because they can't sing like they're supposed to.
Mhm.
There's, you know, our creativity has been undermined. Everything's undermined by this notion that somebody always knows better than us.
Mhm.
And you know, I always tell my clients, no, you are the expert on yourself, not
Yeah,
me, you.
yeah,
And so let's find out who you are.
yeah,
And it's giving people that power back that's so important here, in encouraging that inner inner
Mm.
voice be heard. But, skeptics are going to say, well, what if that, how do you know that you could trust that inner voice? Because that could make you, lead you to make mistakes.
Mistakes are great. We have to be able to embrace our mistakes. And I think this is really, really important for children, the children at the moment who are suffering probably most from that kind of external validation piece. All the likes on Facebook and all those kinds of things. They're looking for this external validation that they're good and they're whole and they're, resourceful and creative. And, it's up to us to say that you already have that within you and you'll make mistakes and you'll learn from them. And that's important. That's how animals learn. We are an animal and we learn. So, obviously, if it's something really serious, then, you'd step in. But I think we've become very obsessed with getting it right all the time and, not being vulnerable, trying not to be vulnerable. And now leadership is very much about being vulnerable and being able to say, I actually don't know. I don't know the answer to this question, but I'll find someone who does, rather than, and that's a strength. And I would really love our children to be educated to understand that they have everything they need inside them. And it's just a question of growing their experience.
The issue of making mistakes is so huge. As you say, mistakes are the means by which we learn. We learn by making mistakes. But when we have parents who are very anxious
Mm-hmm.
and are micromanaging every moment of the child's life,
Yeah.
they're really being very nurturing, very good parents, from the point of view that they're making sure that the child's very well looked after, that they're going to have all the opportunities in the world, but they're missing a point here, and that is
Mm.
needs the opportunity to
Mm.
make decisions and make mistakes. So I
Mm.
think that we are so afraid of pain, and it's that thing of making the mistake that means that I choose the wrong person to marry and my life is going to be a mess afterwards and it's going to be a whole heap of pain. Yeah, there are areas of misjudgment that have big repercussions. But then, so many of my clients who've been going through divorces and going through really difficult times will say to me, yes, but I have my children.
Mm. And
I,
it's it's turning it into a gift if you possibly can. I've been divorced. I see my husband as my greatest teacher. That's how I see it. He gave me two wonderful children. That's his gift to me. But he was an extremely difficult man, and I learned a lot from that difficult situation and how to handle it. So I work with quite difficult situations sometimes in business, and people get very obviously very intense about everything, and it's my job, and sometimes they don't like to be brought out into this world of nature and horses, and it's my job to kind of really confront that and say, step outside your comfort zone, because that's what leadership is, and you're completely open and bare and vulnerable, and you'll learn something very new, and if you don't, then you're very welcome to leave, and I've never had anyone leave. But it is that, getting it wrong. We're so scared of doing something wrong or getting the answer wrong in front of others. And I'm all about celebrating everybody's strengths rather than looking at their weaknesses. We're not perfect, and we don't need to be, because we've got each other. So you build your team around strength, and then you rotate to what the situation needs. So what's appropriate right now in this situation. Oh gosh, it's not Rosie, it's someone else. And that's how it should be in business, and in life generally. And then that's what I try to promote all the time with this work.
when I was a teacher, we used to look at those children who were very reluctant to participate in a lesson. And
Mm-hmm.
there was it we used to refer to that as not afraid to take a risk with their learning. And I think that that is a really good description of that fear of making mistakes, that
Mhm.
are afraid to take risks with our learning. We don't leap in and say, right, okay, whatever happens, it's going to be a good experience. We're so
Mhm.
afraid. So I think, you're absolutely right there. So do you feel that you're making any inroads in changing this culture that is so pervasive in business? Where do you think we are with this?
I know that we are. And I know that we're getting there. And it's about the thing like you reaching out to myself to kind of talk about these things, and slowly, and I would say it's filtering from the top down, which I think is the right way. So I tend to work with the 10% at the top, because obviously in an organization you need to get them on board, otherwise you can't come from the bottom up. They have to buy into it. And initially it was really difficult. Can you imagine, senior corporate team saying, well, we're going to go and work on a farm with horses. And they don't always come to me. I go all over Europe, so there are horses everywhere. And I do a lot of clustering work as well. But it's this kind of persuading them to get out of their heads and come to their senses, because senses is where all that amazing innovation comes from, and creativity. And if we keep stunting ourselves with his heads, and taking ourselves so seriously, laughter is a huge part for me. Having fun with learning is really important. And going out into a situation, which I do with all these groups, they've obviously got context, or the context of your life, what's going on for you. But when I go outside, I have no idea what's going to show up with the horses. So it's again a risk for me as well as a facilitator, because I'm trying to bring the learning. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I wonder what this means. So you have to be very open to what is. And then often I ask the client, is this meaning something to you? And they say, yeah, it's incredible. This horse has just demonstrated exactly what's going on in my life. And I'm okay, really? And I'm like, so could you explain to me? And then I get it. So it's kind of like a partnership, rather than that coaching where you feel like you've got to find all the answers for the client. It's a kind of journey of discovery in a kind of partnering way. And we have a lot of fun, and sometimes things go terribly wrong, and I'm thinking, oh wow, this isn't working, and then you have these amazing insights. If you stay open and you trust in the process, less is more. I keep finding that time and time again. As a coach, I always say, when you feel like you want to step in to rescue, you need to step back and just let it be. Yeah. And that's where the deep gold comes from, that real depth of learning for all of us. It's like, wow. And you would have missed it if you had kind of taken charge or taken control.
Absolutely. That temptation to rescue you're absolutely right. That's where we need to step back and allow the person to process what's happening, and so on. As a therapist, I understand that completely. So, how do you feel so if you're working with upper management,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel that this is then changing the culture of the company, and is it benefiting the everyone lower down?
Yes, because they often come, as I say, and they are cynical about the process, and they're very busy people. So am I going to waste my time with you today? And the learning that they find, that the gold that they find for themselves is the important piece. Who am I? How am I showing up? Is the key thing here. And then they start to soften, and they start to trust each other, and you can see it because they're all in the same boat. For once, nobody has the answers. Nobody's used to horses. Nobody's around horses. Or in the classroom, as I say, I do all sorts of models that I use in different ways with nature. And then that vulnerability of those leaders to actually put themselves in a position where they don't know starts to promote conversation, and a lot more security in each other. And often these teams are remote, so they never have any time, as you know, in person with each other. So it builds a bond. And I say they remember it because it's so memorable. It's like an anchor. Do you remember when we did that and it didn't work? You know, and we had that disaster on our hands. And then they rebuild and they say, well, what went right, what went wrong, and they're able to try again in a different way, and then they have success. And it's that wonderful sense of we've done it together. You know, this is amazing. And that transfer to when they go back into the business, everything that we do outside has a relevance in business. So I always bring it back. So how does that show up for you in the business world, in your area of expertise? Would you say that that's representative of what's going on right now in your culture? And so I'm continually bringing it back from the business back into the nature piece.
I've just had this idea, and I'm just going to introduce it and see what you think of it. Could there be an application of this for conflict resolution?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
that potential there. And have you done this with that aim?
Yeah, I had one last week. I mean, not I think I think you're thinking of a one-on-one situation where there's been personal conflict. Or no, you're not. Okay.
Oh, I'm seeing, you know, in terms of negotiations, let's say in the classic, you know, there's going to be a strike, you know, and unions and management are not, you know, seeing eye to eye. In any kind of big tense conflict resolution, I'm just wondering whether
Oh
you've
yeah.
done this.
So last week I had a group of engineers who came from all over Europe, and they run their own businesses under an umbrella organization. So some of them are doing really well and some of them not doing so well, but they have to share profits. So they were not enjoying each other's company too well when I first met them, because obviously I do work beforehand. I don't just take them straight outside. So there was a lot of infighting, a lot of, you know, competitive dog eat dog kind of mentality, you know, why should I share all of this kind of stuff. And so obviously my job then was to try to have some kind of reconciliation between them by the end of the 2 days. And so my journey with them was to say, to show them and to make them feel how it's so important to work together, because you're so much stronger when you work in an experience like this outside outside your comfort zone, and how all your strengths together will make the success of the business. And it was just wonderful to see, especially, as I say, with some of these naysayers. I ask them at the beginning of the day, I always say, what's the first word that's coming up for you, the first feeling, or what are you actually thinking right now? And, you know, it was quite funny because there was some quite negative people in the room, and one of them just went, he was a great big guy, an engineer, amazing chap, and he just went poppycock. That's and I said, that's brilliant. I really love cynics. You know, I love anyone who's cynical, because I'm going to transform you by the end of the day. And guess what? You know, by the end of the day, this guy was laughing, he was relaxed, he'd kind of seen his fellows going through the same processes as him, and they related to each other, which they hadn't been doing before. They'd been battling, and that kind of understanding that, you know, it's almost impossible to work like that. You have to be collaborative, you have to be rotational, you have to drop the ego, and you'd have to discover strengths in the group that you know, I was probably one of the worst, because I'm very creative. I really didn't get on with accountants, because they were always trying to stop me doing things, you know. Oh no, we haven't got any money for that, you know. And I'd think, oh no. And so I was always kind of allergic to accountants. And now I really value the accountants, because they're, you know, they're the safeguard mechanism in your business, and they save your life. You know, you could have got the idea wrong, and you're so kind of headstrong. And that's what's so great, understanding that everybody has strengths and everyone has weaknesses, and finding the right person for the job, just as nature does in the wild. And that was where they ended up after 2 days. And it was a great success.
I love it. And I am sure that my audience is beginning to appreciate why I find your work so exciting. Rosie, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome.
The book that we have been discussing is Let Nature Be Your Compass. And here it is. If people want to find you, Rosie, how do they do that?
So obviously my book's on Amazon, on Amazon, so you can pick it up there, and it's in quite a lot of bookshops. And you can always order it. If you want to come and see me personally or look at my website is Instinctive. So it's N-Stinctive.com, instinctive.com. And all the products that I do, the one-on-one coaching, the online programs, the team days are all on my website. So I'd be delighted for anyone to reach out or, get in touch by email. And I'm sure they can come by yourself if necessary. But yes, please read my book and spread the word. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to your wonderful listeners.
Absolutely a joy to have you on today. Thank you again. I will be putting a link to everything in the description box, including the book. Thank you once again, Rosie.
Bye for now.
And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're looking at somatic trauma. Until then, have a great week and goodbye.
Bye-bye.